Michael Harris felt the weight of the world pressing down on him like the Montana storm itself. His life had already been carved into fragments he couldn't piece back together. His wife lost in a crash that had left him hollow. His daughter, silent for 10 months, trapped in her own quiet grief, and their home slowly devoured by unpaid bills stacked like grim monuments to failure. Yet tonight, the rain had one more twist in store, a test that would not let him look away. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle with the sheets of rain, smearing everything into streaks of gray. Headlights glared and bounced off the wet asphalt, the twisted mountain road ahead curling through pine shadows like a black ribbon leading nowhere. Michael's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened, each pulse a reminder that he was alive, but barely holding on. 38 years, 2 tours as an Army medic, and he had survived more than most could imagine. And yet here, he was, undone by numbers, notices, and the slow, suffocating collapse of hope. The foreclosure notice pressed against his ribs felt like a stone. Its edges bit into his hand like memory itself, sharp and unrelenting. He slid it back into the envelope, trying to ignore the weight of bureaucracy and failure, but it lingered. A glance in the rearview mirror caught Emily, small and fragile in her booster seat, the red dress her mother had loved clinging to her like a memory he couldn't touch. Her eyes followed the raindrops racing down the glass, but he knew she was looking somewhere else, somewhere beyond pain, beyond loss, somewhere no one else could reach. He wanted to call her name, to promise safety, to stitch her fractured world back together. The words lodged in his throat, hard and unyielding. Lightning split the ridge, turning the world white for a heartbeat. Pines, asphalt, rocks, the curves of the road, all illuminated, then swallowed by darkness again. Michael eased into a turnout, letting the engine idle, breathing as his therapist had taught. In, hold, out, hold. It steadied his trembling hands, but not the ache that pressed, like iron behind his chest. He tucked the envelope among the pile of bills in the glove box and closed it gently, as if quiet hands could calm the storm raging inside him. He checked the mirrors, saw Emily's still form, then slid back onto the road. The night moved ahead, in black waves, narrowing between the dense pine and the silver smear of rain. Exhaustion seeped into his bones, heavy and relentless, when a dark shape suddenly burst into his headlights. He slammed the brakes, tires screamed, mud and water sprayed. The truck fishtailed and came to a stop just inches from the figure sprawled across the road. Michael's heart hammered, throat tight. Hazard lights flashed, revealing a German shepherd, soaked, matted, streaked with gray and gold, as if embers refused to die in the storm. Its chest rose and fell in even, steady rhythm. No panic, only resolve. And those eyes, amber, ancient, sharp, calculating, locked onto him, weighing him, measuring the worth of the man who had stopped. Michael stepped out into the downpour, boots sloshing in water. "Easy, boy," he murmured, his voice low, the medic in him taking over instinctively. He reached out a hand, expecting a snap or a retreat. Nothing. Instead, the dog rose, water sliding off its powerful frame, muscles coiled with quiet, purposeful strength. It turned gracefully, moving toward the shadowed trees, stopping just a few yards in, eyes glinting back at him. Invitation. Rain ran down Michael's face, soaked through his collar. The truck idled behind him, Emily silent inside, a fragile figure framed in red. Every rational thought screamed to leave, to ignore the call, but those eyes, unyielding, commanding, pulled at something deep in him. The soldier inside recognized the command. Not a trap, not a plea, but a summons. He muttered a curse, grabbed the flashlight from the glove box and glanced once at Emily before shutting the truck door with a decisive thud. The forest swallowed, him immediately. The roar of rain on metal faded to the drip and patter from needles and leaves. Mud clung to his boots, branches clawed at his flannel shirt. Max moved ahead, precise, deliberate, not wandering but guiding. Michael caught glimpses of claw marks on trees, a broken chain half buried in mud, and then, strangely, an iron fence, nearly invisible under vines stretching deep into the shadows. He crouched, sweeping the flashlight upward. Tiny glass eyes stared back, security cameras camouflaged among branches. His stomach twisted. This wasn't wilderness. Someone had built this, someone who didn't want to be found. Max paused just beyond the fence, rain dripping from his muzzle. Michael's breath came hard, fogging the cold night. Perimeter defenses, signs of heavy use, hidden surveillance. This wasn't random. It was deliberate, heart pounding sharper than fear. He followed the dog through a gap in the vines. Then came the distant sound of barking. Not scattered strays, but controlled, desperate, disciplined. He killed the flashlight beam, crouched low, and edged forward. Ahead. Floodlights. Cut across a clearing. The forest fell away, revealing a compound carved into the earth. Chain-link kennels lined in rows, dogs pacing, lunging, voices rising in a terrible rhythm. Men in dark jackets moved between cages, shouting commands, cracking whips, dragging animals into pits where they circled, teeth bared. These weren't companions. They were being forged into weapons. Michael pressed a hand to the wet earth, steadying himself. Every instinct screamed to get Emily and leave, to pretend none of this existed. But he looked at Max. The shepherd stood on the ridge, ears pricked, gaze locked on the compound below. Rain streamed from his coat, stance unshaken. Recognition in his eyes. Max hadn't just led him here. This was home, a crack of twigs. Michael spun, heart vaulting. A guard climbed the incline, flashlight slicing the night, boots sinking in mud, radio hissing bursts of static. Michael pressed flat against the slope, breath shallow, beam sweeping dripping branches. The guard froze over his boot. Eyes met. "Hey!" The shout ripped the night. The man lunged for his pistol. Instinct surged. Michael slammed his shoulder into the guard, tumbled into mud, fists and elbows driving. Then Max struck, muscle and fur, jaws clamping the guard's sleeve. With brutal precision, the man cursed, flailed, giving Michael a split second to drive an elbow and shove him aside. Guard collapsed, disarmed but alive. Max stood over him, growling low, sentinel and guardian. Michael's chest heaved. He stared at the unconscious man, then at Max. The shepherd's eyes held steady, as if asking, "Now, do you see what you've walked into?" The compound below was no longer just a shadowed horror. It was a war zone. Michael crouched in the dripping dark, mud caked on. His hands, pulse ragged. Guards down, dogs beaten into obedience. Max never leaving his post. His instinct screamed, "Get Emily! Leave! Forget this place!" Every step deeper into this forest carried them farther from her safety. Then came the echoes, the dogs below, barking, howling, crying, voices raw and stripped. Not noise, but accusation. Michael's chest tightened. He had seen battlefields, seen men broken and discarded. But these creatures hammered into weapons, spirits bent and reshaped. This was war too, just quieter, just as relentless. Michael pulled his phone from his jacket, thumbs shaking as he opened the camera. He leaned over the ridge again, recording the cages, the handlers, the brutal training. The lens drank in every frame. Proof. Max pressed closer, shoulder brushing Michael's knee. The shepherd's stance was steady, gaze locked downward as if telling, "Him, don't look away, not this time." Michael swallowed hard, rain dripping from his lashes. He knew this wasn't just chance. He hadn't almost run that dog over by accident. He'd been brought here. The choice crystallized. Turn back to silence or step forward into a fight that mattered. He slid the phone back into his jacket, exhaled slow. "We're not done here," he whispered. Max's ears flicked at the words, and for the first time in months, Michael felt something stir beneath the grief. A mission. Night bled deeper into the forest. The compound's floodlights carved hard white lines against the black. While Michael lay flat in the mud above, breath steady, phone tucked safe in his jacket. Max crouched beside him, a coiled spring of silence. Michael waited for the patrol to pass, then slipped down the slope. His fingers found the bolt on the first kennel. Rust groaned faintly as he pulled. Inside, a shepherd pressed forward, ribs sharp. Beneath its coat, eyes wide with a hope too fragile to voice, the door gave way. The dog slipped out, vanishing into the dark. One cage became two became four. A rhythm formed. Unlatch, release, whisper, until the night filled with furtive shapes darting into the trees. Then, Daddy. The voice froze his blood. Hespun. There, half hidden in shadow, was Emily, her small, frame trembling, red dress darkened by rain. She must have followed from the truck, desperate not to be left again. A flashlight beam swept across the yard, shouts, boots pounding mud. Michael lunged, scooping Emily into his arms. Max barked sharp, a thunderclap in the chaos, then charged a guard, knocking him sprawling. Michael ran, heart hammering, clutching Emily close as dogs scattered like ghosts into the storm. Behind him, the compound erupted, men shouting, steel clanging, alarms blaring. Ahead, Max tore through the brush, leading them on, eyes flashing like twin lanterns in the black. Michael didn't look back. There was no going back. They had started something, and the night was alive with the sound of freedom breaking loose. The compound roared with chaos, alarms blaring, dogs scattering into the storm. Michael clutched Emily close, feet sinking in the mud, when a figure stepped into the floodlight, blocking his path. Broad shoulders, scar across his jaw, eyes like steel pits. The man radiated command through violence alone. "You're not leaving," he growled. Michael set Emily behind him, hands steady, though his chest thundered. "I'm not leaving them." The man lunged. Their bodies collided, fists cracking, mud spraying. Michael's training surged back, but the man was younger, ruthless, driving him into the fence. Metal rattled, dogs barked in frenzy. Then Max exploded from the dark, slamming into the man, buying Michael a heartbeat. Hess struck hard, elbow into the scarred jaw, blood mixed with rain. Just as Michael staggered back to his feet, sirens rose in the distance, growing louder, cutting through the storm. His phone, the video he'd recorded, the desperate call he had sent. It had reached someone. Red and blue lights tore across the tree-eyed police trucks barreled into the compound. Officers spilled out, rifles raised, shouts echoing into the night. Guards scattered, some firing back before being slammed to the ground. But the scarred man didn't flinch. He grabbed a baton, swung with brutal force. Michael ducked, felt the strike graze. His shoulder, fire burning down his arm. He staggered, but Max circled, teeth bared. Another swing. Michael drove forward, tackling him into the mud. They rolled, fists hammering, until Michael pinned him, fist raised. For armament, thunder drowned everything. Alarms, shouts, sirens. Michael's body was spent, every muscle screaming, but his will held firm. With own final surge, he let his fist fall, not to kill, but to end it. The man lay stunned beneath him as police swarmed, snapping cuffs onto his wrists. Michael turned, breath ragged, Emily clinging to his side. Max stood guard, eyes blazing in the floodlights. The compound was falling, but Michael had already won his battle. Days later, the storm had passed. The compound was nothing but Ascar Inn. The forest, dismantled piece by piece under police tape and heavy machinery. But for Michael, the true weight had shifted elsewhere. He sat on his porch, Emily curled against him, Max lying at their feet. The house was still small, still lined with unpaid bills, but now neighbors stopped by. Strangers wrote letters. Local news had told the story of the veteran who helped expose an illegal training ring, and the dog holed him there. And people wanted to help. It began with calls from shelters, rescues, volunteers offering supplies. Then came donations, enough to rent a barn outside town. Michael walked through its empty stalls one quiet morning, the air thick with the scent of hay and dust. He ran a hand along the wood, imagining kennels not of chains but of care, a place not of cruelty but of healing. Emily's laughter carried from outside where Max played Guardiana as always. For the first time in months, her voice was free, unbroken, alive. Michael felt it then. The clarity he hadn't known since the war. This wasn't just survival. It was purpose. He knelt, scratching Max behind the ears. The shepherd leaned into him, steady and warm, eyes reflecting something more than instinct. "We'll build it," Michael whispered. "A place for them, for all Ophis." Max exhaled, a sound like quiet agreement. And just like that, the first stones of a new foundation were laid, not of brick or mortar, but of trust, sacrifice, and the fierce will to protect. Months later, the barn had changed. Where empty stalls once stood, warm kennels lined the walls. Where silence lingered, now came the chorus of barks, yips, and the steady rhythm of life returning. Michael walked the aisles lowly, hand-brushing each gate, pausing to kneel by a shepherd with weary eyes, a scar on its flank. "You're safe now," he murmured. The dog leaned forward, trembling, then pressed its head into his palm. Emily's laughter rang out from the yard. She was tossing a ball, 3 young rescues chasing after it clumsily. Her voice was brighter, her steps lighter. Every trace of silence washed away. And Max, always Max, stood tall either side, the watchful guardian, his amber eyes calm, commanding. Dogs that trembled found steadiness near him. Volunteers spoke of him as if he understood every word. Michael knew better. Max had chosen this role as surely as he had chosen Michael that night on the road. The sign above the gate read, "Harris Rescue Center for Healing, for Hope." Donations flowed. More dogs arrived, and with them came families ready to adopt. One evening, as the sun melted into the Montana peaks, Michael sat on the porch with Emily curled against him. Max stretched at their feet. The sky burned orange and violet, painting a horizon that no longer felt heavy. Emily tilted her face up. "Daddy, are we happy now?" Michael looked at her, at Max, at the sanctuary they had built together. His chest swelled, not with grief, but with peace. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, "we're home." And as the last light faded, 3 figures sat together. Soldier, child, and guardian.